To our listening friends, I'm going to go ahead and start with a short reading from the Gospel of St. Matthew. This is from the fourth chapter of the Gospel of St. Matthew. The title of this section, The Call of the First Disciples. As he was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and his brother Andrew, casting a net into the sea. They were fishermen. He said to them, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." At once they left their nets and followed him. He walked along from there and saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets. He called them, and immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. I've thought about this verse and the call of the first apostles in this chapter from the Gospel of Matthew of these four who were fishermen. And there's a certain interest that I have with fishing. I've been fishing a number of times, but I think just in the concept of fishing and how that the skills that they had, or even the disciplines, could be applied to their new ministry as apostles of the Lord. First, I think that there's a sense of adventure. If you go out to a lake or a river or the ocean and you go fishing, there's a sense of adventure. There's a sense of excitement, enthusiasm, especially if it's a day when they're biting. There's a sense of patience. If they're not biting that day, you don't have a sense of patience. There's the opportunity for innovation. If something is not working, a place or the time of day or the bait, to innovate a little bit, to try different methods. There's really a sense of joy. I have had the great experience of being with friends and their children to see them catch the first fish. I remember this young girl of a family that I was friends with when I was in the seminary, and she's married. I officiated her marriage, and she's got several children of her own now. But when she was a little girl, in a little pond behind their farmhouse, and she caught a small little catfish, her first fish, and the joy she had was no different than if she had caught a marlin, a prize marlin. She just had that great joy of the catch. So anyways, I think it's interesting that Peter, Andrew, James, and John were fishermen. And in the Gospel of Matthew, the first called to follow the Lord. So our topic for this evening, and you've heard me say this before, but it's my hope as a pastor that everyone who comes up for the sacrament of confirmation, based in our advanced program, as well as for our youth, we have usually 14, 15 years old who will be confirmed next month, that all of our candidates have some understanding of the seven sacraments. So our theme for this evening will be the sacrament of holy orders. And again, the hope is that anyone who is confirmed has some understanding, and maybe in a conversation, what somebody will say, well, what is it about a deacon? What is a deacon, transitional deacon or permanent deacon? What about the priesthood? What's that about the priest you have, or the bishop? Who is the bishop? What does the bishop do? So that's to be able to talk about it. And then, of course, the hope is, I remember when I was younger, I never thought about the priesthood But here I am. I have 3 brothers, and I'm the second of the brothers. And I can remember walking out of the church one day, and the old Monsignor was at the door. And he looked at my dad, and he saw these 4 boys, and we were like little steps, going down. And I remember the priest said, "Oh, 4 boys. Well, maybe one of them will be a priest." And I remember looking around and said, "Well, I don't know about these guys, but it surely won't be me." So here I am. So did you get the paper? This is a short paper on holy orders. The other thing that we've done in the past, and we're in a little bit different setup because we're in the church and we're here, we have good social distancing, and we also have the camera for streaming, but we don't have the sense of ease of our DVD monitor and all those things. So I'll just go ahead and reiterate what's on the website, and what I have encouraged is looking at the Acts of the Apostles video, which is on there. And what we have done the last year or two was we watched a chapter at every session, and really it gives us a view of the early church and the mission of the apostles. So I encourage you to make use of that. And then I just added to the website under the RCIA tab the United States bishops, maybe 10 years ago or so, they put out a video on the priesthood called Fishers of Men. And it's kind of on the history of the priesthood as well as the call to priest today. So instead of trying to bring a monitor in here and watching that here, that will be part of your, my encouragement to you would be to go and watch that either on your computer, or if you have some other device, tablet or whatever, or a smart TV, because I've watched that video, Fishers of Men, several times, and it really, sorry, there must be a kink in the wire. It really is an excellent show. I jokingly, and trust me, I jokingly said when I first saw it, I can't believe that our bishops came up with something so good. I was just joking, but it really is a first quality. They hired people out to do the filming and all, but it's really excellent quality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell a little bit about what's on the paper here, a little bit about my own story of how I ended up here as the pastor here, or long before I was the pastor here, how I really started in the seminary and everything. And then, of course, Deacon John, who has many, many years in teaching and also in ordained ministry in the church. And then Tracy, who has completed the lay ministry program in the church and is looking to be in a diaconate formation program, also in the sense of a calling and a sense of service to God and the church. So again, holy orders, one of the 7 sacraments. Now just let me stop right there. Someone might ask, and people can ask all kinds of questions, well, why does the church need clergy? Or this particular style that we have. Somebody said, well, why is that necessary? Well, we would say that in response to that this was the plan of the Lord. The Lord is the head of the church. And by calling forth the apostles, as he did, and then also commissioning them at the end of his earthly ministry, in the sense of when he was here, even after the resurrection, he ascended to heaven, he basically entrusted his apostles to continue the call. And of course, this is for all the church, the clergy and the laity, but certainly the clergy have an important place because they're dedicated totally to the mission. And so this has been in place for the church for a long time. It's not to say that a priest, a deacon, or a bishop is better than anyone else, and certainly there are many in the laity who have tremendous gifts and tremendous talents. More the sense of the family of God, everyone has a place. Two images that I have heard about, in a sense of the hierarchical, the structure of the church, one of which I have no experience in, and that would be like the leader of an orchestra. I had one grandfather who had that kind of talent. Like the leader of the orchestra, he might not be able to play all of the instruments, but he can coordinate them and direct them. The violins or the cellos, the trumpets. He can help bring it all together. The other image would be that of a captain. And when you think of the old days of sailing, some of those ships had numerous sails for different wind conditions. There were different jobs on a boat. The ropes, the anchors, even the cook. There were different people had different positions. But the captain, of course, with his other leaders, his officers, had a sense of delegation. So in a certain sense, the church is like that. You could say, in a sense, the bishop is the captain of the diocese, and then the pastors of the parishes have their function. The head of the seminary has his job. And then, of course, all of us depend on the laity that fill in all of the jobs from top to bottom. So, holy orders makes an indelible mark on the soul. So there's something that we can't see physically, but also the sacrament of baptism and confirmation also put a mark on the soul. It's like a seal. When you think of days long ago, for example, in the Roman legions, some members of the legions might have had a special tattoo or something that marked them to be part of that unit. Well, this is in the soul, that God can recognize his own. To use an image from a human perspective, God can recognize the mark on the soul. The ordained ministers of the church form the hierarchical structure that is set apart for ministry. Years ago, I was working as an engineer, and I was invited to a retreat in Louisiana. It was my first trip to Louisiana, and it was in I think it's called the Bayou, kind of a remote area. It was like a 20-mile causeway to get across to it. And it was an old, like a mother house that had been a novitiate, a training. Well, anyway, we're having our retreat there. I was in the early phases of discerning a vocation to holy orders. But I didn't really know where or what to do. I didn't really have any clear indication. Well, on this retreat, there were brothers, those they're not part of holy orders, but they're dedicated to the life of the church. There were sisters also. They're not in holy orders, but they're religious. And there were priests, mission priests, teachers, as well as there was one parish priest. And I'll tell you this because it's funny looking back. I met this priest. He was a young priest. He was probably about the same age I was at the time. He'd been ordained for 5 years. And I was a few years out of college. And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, well, I'm in a parish, and I really like parish work. And I remember thinking to myself, this poor guy likes parish work. I felt like, well, isn't that kind of like if you're, like I didn't understand, isn't that like the bottom rung of the church, something like, he's not teaching in a university or going to foreign missions or anything, but he's in a parish. Again, that was a long time ago, more than 30 years ago. That's all that I've done for the last 25 years as a priest, is parish work. And I can say now I know what he's talking about. I like parish work. I don't have any ambition to be teaching in a university or working in an office with the diocese or anything like that. This really is my calling. But again, I'm just saying it, before I really understood anything, I was thinking, this poor guy likes parish work. Well, so do I. Okay, the diaconate, and I'm going to let Deacon John really go into that in much more detail. But the deacons have an order, the order of deacons. And everyone who celebrates another order in holy orders, for me, the priesthood or the bishop, everybody in holy orders was a deacon. And so I am very thankful for the time of my ordination as a deacon in my home parish in Salisbury, and the time I served as a deacon with, first baptism was as a deacon, first homily as a deacon, and even I officiated one wedding as a deacon. And really didn't know what I was doing a lot, but it was a great ministry for me. And we had deacons, their first homily. The joke was at the seminary, usually you're ordained as a deacon 6 to 8 months or so before the priesthood ordination. And so some of the deacons, they'd been in seminary sometimes for 6 years or so. So when they finally had the chance to give their first homily, some of them, they took all of the good things that they had learned in the last 6 years and tried to put all of that into that homily. But anyway, it all worked out. Sometimes the joke was after the deacon's first homily, well, that was 3 good homilies. Anyway, it was all kind of in fun. So the Acts of the Apostles, I have this referenced here. The ministry of the deacon was from the early church, because the Acts of the Apostles is the early church. And they're ministers of the Word, the Liturgy, and also in charity. And we're very thankful for our deacons in this parish, and we'll have one parishioner to be ordained a deacon in September, early fall. And so we're very thankful for that. And then also we look forward to the future as well. And that's one of the things I'll mention to Deacon John as well. Usually Tuesday of Holy Week will be at the Chrism Mass. So maybe you and your brother deacons, one of you can cover Eucharistic service on Tuesday of Holy Week. So we've been getting a good crowd for daily Mass here. The ministry of charity involves service to the poor and also the ministry to the sick. And our deacons have regularly, throughout their ordained ministry, as well as times before that as well, to bring communion and blessings to the sick, to officiate marriages and to baptize, welcome children and others to the family of God, the faith, also to officiate graveside services, funeral services outside of Mass, and we get a good many of those requests over here. And also benediction of the Blessed Sacrament. Tomorrow is the first Friday of the month, and it is our tradition, it's a tradition in the church, to have Eucharistic adoration on the first Friday of the month. So we'll have adoration, which will begin following the 9 a.m. Mass, and then from 7, it'll be mostly quiet adoration during the day, and then from 7 to 8, we have an organized holy hour with music and a meditation. And so, again, the deacons can do all of that. Priest, the word priest comes from the word meaning elder. The Catholic Church sees the priesthood as both a reflection of the ancient Jewish priesthood in the temple and the work of our Lord as our high priest. So I identify with Jesus, the high priest, and really the task of every priest is to serve in the person of Christ, especially in the sacraments, in the sense of consecration, forgiving of sins, anointing of the sick, and blessings as well, blessings in the person of Christ. The Liturgy of Ordination recalls the Old Testament priesthood and the priesthood of Christ. In the words of St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the great teachers of the church and a priest, Christ is the source of all priesthood. The priest of the old law was a prefiguration of Christ, and the priest of the new law acts in the person of Christ. So that's a great summary right there. Priests celebrate masses. Pretty much a priest has a mass every day. And in my 25 years as a priest, it's been very rare days that I have not celebrated or concelebrated a mass. Sometimes in international travel or illness. I was in the hospital once, and it was one of those things. But that's really the high point of my day. And like tomorrow morning, I'll have Mass here at 9 a.m. Hearing confessions, been very busy here during Lent, and that's something we'll talk about with you next week, because Easter is a week from today. So we actually are coming to, as I mentioned, after the Christmas break, the time passes very quickly. So we have some things we have to do with this program, and we're very excited about it, and we're very hopeful for your future as well. But we have some things over the next few weeks that we will cover. Marriages, and again, deacons as well involved in marriage prep and marriages. I was called yesterday to administer the anointing of the sick to a parishioner under hospice care. And usually someone on hospice care is the medical evaluation is usually 6 months or less to live in this life. Of course, there's no way to pinpoint these things exactly, but through medical experience, that was the evaluation. And to minister confirmation, last fall, the bishop had delegated our chancellor to confer confirmation, and then he was sick at that time, so the bishop then delegated me. So the bishop is the ordinary minister of the confirmation for the parish class, but he can delegate a priest to confirm. And so when he does that, it would usually be the pastor of the parish or the vicar, which is like the head priest of that area. Bishops are chosen from among the priests in the church. Now, our bishop is somewhat of a minority in the sense is that he was a priest of the Diocese of Charlotte and then became the bishop. The bishops that we had before all came, well, the first one came from this diocese as well, but other bishops have come from other parts of the country. For example, Washington, D.C., or like the Bishop of Charleston came from New York. Sometimes is even to another country or something. So the Pope makes all appointments based on his own advisors. So I said it was nice in a way that our bishop, when he was ordained a bishop, he already knew all of the parishes. He'd been a priest in the diocese for 20 years, and he already knew all of the priests. So it wasn't like he was coming in and had to meet everybody and find his way around. He already knew his way around. So that was, in a certain sense, an advantage in that situation. But the next bishop after that, there's no way to know. Bishops are, in a sense, the shepherd of the flock of the diocese. And we have in our diocese more than 90 locations of parishes and missions, a number of Catholic schools, of Catholic ministries. And the bishop, as I said, he's kind of like the head of the orchestra of all of these things. And even property, building, endowments, the bishop is the overseer of all of these things. Now, he has a lot of advisors and staff people, but he is the shepherd of the church. Each bishop has a diocese. Well, pretty much for the most part, all bishops have a territory to be in charge of. Now, there are bishops who work in various offices and things like that, but for the most part, the bishops of the church are associated where they serve. Some people had asked me, like when I was ordained, well, what if the bishop sends you to Kentucky or somewhere like that? So no, our bishop is the bishop of the Diocese of Charlotte. And Charlotte is the western half of North Carolina. So our bishop doesn't have jurisdiction in other places. Like to say, okay, that was kind of like the joke. Well, the bishop might not like you, so he'll send you to the Yukon Territory or something like that. Well, he doesn't have any jurisdiction in the Yukon Territory. He might wish that he would send me to the Yukon Territory, but he can't do that. We have these 90 locations here in the Diocese of Charlotte. And so when I was appointed here, I wasn't that familiar with the parish. I'm familiar with the area. I was in Charlotte before I came here, but I was very pleased to be invited to come here. And it wasn't, some people think you get like a letter like you're in the army or something telling you where to go. They basically called me and said, we would like you to go to Mooresville. Do you accept? And I said, yes, I accept. Lord, I am not worthy, but if you want me to go to Mooresville, I will go. And so I'm very, very happy to be here. So the bishop makes all those appointments, again, with his advisors helping him. Even the bishop has a council. We have a parish council here, a pastoral council in the parish. Every parish should have a pastoral council and a finance council. The bishop as well is not just like a prince or something. He has what's called a presbyteral council, which is basically like the pastoral council for the bishop. And I happen to be a member of that. I didn't ask to be on it, but I was appointed to the bishop's council. So we have a meeting next Tuesday, thankfully on Zoom, so I don't have to drive to Charlotte. But we basically advise the bishop on some things coming up in the diocese and various ministries. So the bishop himself recognizes the need for advisors and consultation. It would be the same for me as the pastoral council, and Tracy served for many years as leader of the pastoral council. If we were going to for example, make an addition or a renovation or something, the pastor just doesn't do it on his own. But first he makes some consultation. Even as Tracy remembers this, a few years ago, we were looking at some adjoining property. Now again, even for your own families, if the place next door becomes available, you should at least look at it, because you don't know who else is going to be looking at it, or could you use it? Could it help you in your future? And so we looked into it, and we did some consultation, and we ended up purchasing the property. And I think really is for the future of the parish. 6.8 acres, adjacent property, and 3 houses. It wasn't that we needed it at that minute, but for the future of the parish. And so we all know that the area is growing in population. You just look around at some of the clearings and new apartments and new houses. And so the parish projected to continue to grow. And so for our future, and we're blessed that we have good property here, but some parishes are landlocked, but you don't want to be in a situation where a few years down the line you'd say, we should have done that, but we didn't think about it. If you ever go by Main Street and see the old church, it's now a Mexican restaurant on North Main Street. It was basically like a house lot. And some of the old timers, or the senior parishioners, so to speak, not the old timers, but if they were on, say, less than an acre, I'm sure it is less than an acre of the old church, coming over here, there were some people who said, why should we need all this property? And this was considered kind of out in the country. Why should we need all that property? Well, now, and we do have some woods and things like that, but it was a wise decision over 30 years ago to get this piece of property. And now we've got more. We've got, So anyway, just using that as an example that as the bishop has advisors, pastors also should be wise enough to listen to advisors as well. At the very end there, from the moment of Jesus' conception in the womb of Mary until his resurrection, he was filled with the Holy Spirit. In biblical language, he was anointed by the Holy Spirit and thus established by God the Father as our high priest. All the baptized share in Christ's priesthood, the priesthood of all believers. But the ministerial priesthood shares this through the sacrament of holy orders in a special way. Those who respond to God's call are repeating the words of the prophet, "Here I am, Lord, send me." And some of the prophets were reluctant prophets. I just saw a message from someone recently that said, "I hear the call, but I don't know if I have the courage to answer it or the confidence." I can say for me, and I'll just say real briefly, I heard the call of the Lord in 1985, so 36 years ago this month. But I didn't think I could ever follow that either. I used to think, I had a job, had a house, I had friends. Could I basically pack up and move away from this to follow the call of the Lord, not even really sure of where it would lead? And what finally convinced me to try was the thought that I don't want to be 60 and wonder, I was about 24, 25 at the time. I said, I don't want to be 60 and wonder if I should have tried. Well, I'm going to be 60 this month, so that was a long time ago. And so I can say that since that time, I've never doubted the calling. And I've certainly never regretted whatever I had there walking away from it, because the Lord has blessed me in so many ways that I could never have imagined. And so, for those of us who are called, will always be fulfilled. There will be challenges, same as in marriage. There are challenges, same as the single life. There are challenges, but for those of us who are called to holy orders, it's fulfilling because it's doing the Lord's work. And the prophets, I think, understood that as well. In the Old Testament, the prophets were sometimes had great rebellion among the people. Like, who are you to tell us to straighten up our lives? And confrontational. But they were basically the spokespeople for the Lord, and in many ways to call them to the righteous path. Any comments or questions on my experience or on holy orders in general? We are always praying too, praying for those who are in preparation, and also that others may respond positively to the ministry in the church. And I would just say that in a general sense, in society, there is skepticism for those who are in ministry. I think there's also some mystery. There's some mystery. If you're coming from a purely materialistic standpoint, there's some mystery even about prayer or devotion. And then also there's affirmation. Sometimes if I go to a store, like hardware store, I'm not in there to preach or to teach, but sometimes it would be somebody very respectful. Oh, where's your church located? What are you doing for Easter? Sometimes there's really a sense of affirmation too. Even in the hospital, I was up in ICU here recently, and some of the nurses there, they generally know who you are when you have this type of shirt. They know you're from the church, even if they don't understand it, but there's generally a sense of respect. Again, there's others who might be very skeptical, but again, society itself, and this goes back to the apostolic times as well, there's always going to be differences of opinions, and the apostles themselves faced great opposition at times, but they persevered. And so I'm going to invite Deacon John, who has many, many years of experience in holy orders, and as well as before that, really as his whole life as a member of the church.
You could say something about your wife's relationship in the program. Okay. Mainly two things. I was ordained 2 years, 1979. Okay? The first decade, deacons were around. So we spent the next decade trying, what do deacons do? A lay minister could do this, a lay minister could do that, priest can do that. What do deacons do? Now we don't ask that question. But the simplest thing is somebody asks you what do deacons do, we hatch, match, and dispatch. We can preside at baptisms. We are the official person to give the sacrament of baptism to somebody else. We are the church's official witness at weddings. And if there was not a mass, we can preside over a funeral, the vigil to the committal to the burial. We also, since Holy Orders gives us part of the hierarchy of the church, we are allowed to preach the gospel and to officially teach, okay, which is a great burden and responsibility, but a great love. We can bless the people. As Aaron was told to bless the people, we can bless the people and objects that the people use. That's pretty simple what we can do. Father talked a lot about it, but I'm going to go a little into deeper on this. Sacraments of matrimony and orders are sacraments of vocation. Vocation comes from the Latin, voco, to call. Specifically, the sacraments of calling. Now, I have had both, so I can give you a relation. When you start dating a person, of someplace along the line, you know that this is the person that you are called, all right, to spend the rest of your life. If you don't have that, don't get married. All right? Literally. You know you're called to be with this person for the rest of your life. That's what the sacrament of matrimony really is about. In the case of the holy orders, you absolutely need to know you've been called. It's not like, I want to be an engineer, so I'll go to college, and if I don't like that, I'll switch to chemistry. Or I'll switch to meteorology, or music, whatever. You need to understand that orders is a calling, and you need to have that calling just as we heard in the gospel. And if you don't, and I have known deacons and priests and even bishops who really turned out that they didn't have the calling and they spent the rest of their life not happy, just doing what they were supposed to do, living good lives, but they didn't have the call. The guy behind me definitely had the call. All right? That's why he's a parish priest. For me, it was a very interesting thing. The Second Vatican Council, well, first of all, deacons were around in the church from the beginning. Stephen, the first bishop. We have Lawrence, the martyr. We have St. Francis of Assisi in the 13th century, was a deacon, never a priest. So they were in the church, and in the end of the Middle Ages, there were so many priests that deacons just fell out of use. Right? Literally, they fell out of use. Until Second Vatican Council in 1962, 63, and 64 had the debate and gave the Pope the permission to reinstitute it, which he did in 1969. 62, 63, then 69, he said, oh, we'll have permanent deacons. Me, in the year that this gentleman was born, was sitting in a class on theology in college. And the professor was saying, well, next year we're going to start this great council, and one of the things they're going to discuss is restoring deacons. At that point, that's all he said. I heard in my being, not in ears, in my being, you are going to be a deacon. Scary, isn't it? All right? To the point that night I had a date with my wife of 57 years. And I said to her, hey, Cheryl, I'm going to be a deacon. And she says, what's a deacon? I said, I have the foggiest idea. I didn't know. And it wasn't until 1975 I started in the deacon program, and I am a deacon this September, 42 years. But I heard that call. I knew that this is something that God called me to do. And as you travel on, being a servant of God, that's what basically a deacon is a servant. There are high points and there's low points, there's tough points, there's road points where you do the thing over and over, and you say, okay. But knowing you're called to do this by Jesus is the fuel. It's the Holy Spirit fueling you to complete what you were called to do. Okay? You with me? So the point I want to make is listen. Listen. You all have a calling. You got to listen to the call. All right? To be maybe married, or to be maybe religious, or to be in orders. But you have to listen and say yes. All right. I'm a very interesting person because I've had all 7 sacraments. Okay? Now that's interesting in itself. I've been anointed several times. And as you get older, you get anointed more. But the point I'm trying to say is the sacrament of holy orders for a permanent deacon and the sacrament of matrimony can't be separated. We'd like to, but we can't. We are one being. We have one spirit, one soul. And on that soul, as Father puts it, they're marked. So whatever I do in my ministry, okay, the grace goes to my wife. And whatever she does in her ministry, the grace goes to me. We share that common bond. All right? She is, the funny part about it, she never ever wanted to be a deacon, trust me. Okay? But she's the best supporter I could possibly have. And the great thing is that over my time in 42 years, I learned to listen to her. Okay? Her spirituality is different than mine. Her view of people's suffering is different than mine. And I could be a good deacon if I didn't listen to her. So that's how these two sacraments are sort of connected. Okay?
Great. Thank you, Deacon. And really on that sense of calling, your own call to do the, ministry in the church as well as the lay ministry.
So on my journey, I would say that I think I've shared this with you guys before. I was sitting in the pew one day, and actually before that, Father Vince, who was the pastor before Father Mark came, he had asked me to get involved with the Pastoral Council. This time I just finished being the Grand Knight of the Knights of Columbus, and really was ready to kind of take a break. And my wife and I were sitting in a mass that we normally didn't go to, and the priest was Father Don Ward, a different priest than Father Vince. Father Vince had asked me if I would step up and get involved with the parish council. And like I said, we're sitting in mass, we're listening to the homily, we walk out, and I'm talking to my wife, and we heard two different things. I heard basically, get off your butt, get involved. There's 24 hours in a day. No matter how busy you are, I'll find a way to, you can do this. My wife heard something that was not even closely remotely to anything about service or a calling. So to me, at that point in time, it was like, okay, there's something bigger that's pulling me. And so as having my own business and was coaching ice hockey, I have kids and all this kind of stuff, it was actually trying to take the time to set aside and to listen. Deacon touched on it. I mean, probably the first time that I was actually given a calling was in high school. My senior year of high school, I went to a Catholic high school. I wasn't born Catholic, but I was in a Catholic high school. I was Catholic at that point. And it was ran by the Marinist community, and one of the brothers had invited me and two other guys to kind of spend the weekend at their rectory and learn more about religious life. And of course, at that age, the first thing we were excited about, because we were 18, I was in Texas, and you could drink at 18, was, all right, we get to have a beer tonight and have pizza. And so that was the first time that someone had ever came to me and said, hey, have you ever thought about this? And quite honestly, it went in one ear and out the other. I was more interested in women than I was, listening to, something that I wasn't sure about. But then, it just, you kept hearing different things and seeing different things throughout, my life, that it just kept kind of coming back to me. And so by getting involved in the parish council, what it did is it opened my eyes to see the good and the bad of what the Catholic Church can be about, or a parish church can be about. And and for years we were ran by Jesuits, which is a different order, and the Jesuits are the educators, but sometimes they kind of had danced to their own beat, if you would. So there's a program called the Lay Ministry Program that the diocese puts on. It's a prerequisite, if you would, to going into the Diaconate program. And male or female are welcome to participate, but it's a 2-year program. And I had never even heard of that until right before the Jesuits left. And I'd been in the parish at that point for 12 years and never even heard anything about it. So what that did, the first year of that, actually talks about the history of the church, gives you a better meaning of it. And then that second year, you're basically learning more of the social aspects of it. You're debating topics. You're getting deeper in your faith and trying to figure out, it's more about learning. And now the phase that I'm at today is for the diaconate program, they start off with, it's about 70, 75 men. And at the end of it, I think it averages in between 20 to 30 after the 4.5 to 5 years of education and training that actually become deacons. So I've submitted basically a letter. Father Mark's written a letter on my behalf, and should know, I would think, around Easter or shortly after Easter if I'm accepted in the program or not. And then from that point, that first year, it's about learning more about your faith, more about just more about your spirit, if you would. But one thing that's very interesting that Deacon John brought up is the wife. So my wife and I have had many conversations about this, because she's going to be interviewed several times and she's going to have to participate in the classes. But at any point in time, if she says that she's not interested, has nothing to do with me. If she says no, then it's over. Because it is something that the commitment that she has is as great as the commitment that I would be giving. And it was kind of funny, and I'll use Cheryl as an example, Deacon John's wife. I was telling my wife, who's she's got a big mouth. She talks a lot. She loves to be the center of attention from time to time, which is great. But we were talking. I said, well, one of the things you got to consider as we're thinking about this is you could lose your identity. She's like, everybody in the parish knows who I am. I said, well, you're making an assumption. I said, the first assumption is that we'd stay in this parish. You're basically a servant, and the deacon or the bishop can assign you to anywhere 30 miles from your home. So, there's a chance that we may not be in this parish. But, so I told her about that. Then I said, and she said, well, that's okay. Everybody knows who I am. And I said, okay. I said, Deacon John? She said, yeah. I said, what's his wife's name? She said, well, I know who she is. I said, okay. I said, what's her name? She sat there for a second. She said, I couldn't tell you. I said, I've always referred to her as Deacon John's wife. I said, her name's Cheryl. And then all of a sudden it kind of hit her that, hey, maybe I am going to have to make some sacrifices, and it is more of a commitment on my part. And again, so as I go through these next few steps, I don't know where it's going to end up. I just know that I felt that there's something that I should explore more. I think it's something that I want to, definitely want to do. It's just in case you're wondering, for a deacon, there's no financial interest. There's nothing from the church that is paid to a deacon. So, it's basically on top of everything, your regular, livelihood in your life. So, to me, I've kind of looked at it and said, I've been blessed with a lot of things. I've had a lot of great opportunities. And now it's kind of, how do I continue to give back? Because once you start giving back, I just feel like I get so much more than what I've ever given when I do things for others. And so that's been one of the things that's kind of driven me a little bit. And so if you have any questions or anything, because at this point, like I said, I have no clue where it's going to end up. I'm praying that it goes the direction I want, but at some point in time, we'll all understand. No? Okay.
Thank you. Oops. Thank you for those personal testimonies, as well as to add to our session this evening. As a priest, I've been blessed to have written letters of recommendation for those in the permanent diaconate program, lay ministry program as well, and also to the seminarian program. And as Tracy just said, I had, the bishop makes all the clergy appointments. there was a time when I was a pastor in Charlotte, and we had 3 parishioners in the diaconate, permanent diaconate formation. And at the time of their ordination, one was assigned to the parish where they had been, and then the other 2 were each assigned to other parishes in the area. So again, I was friends with all 3 of them, but only one of them stayed at the parish. One of them, who had helped me with the RCIA for years, was assigned to a neighboring parish. So again, but he understood that, just as Tracy said, in the time of formation. I'll tell you one story about one of our newest pastor. He was just appointed as the pastor of the parish in Thomasville, which is a little bit more than an hour east of here. Well, years ago, and he's the oldest of 15 children in his family, native of Mexico. And I got to know the family. He used to work for me as like helping with the music for the Mass and helping with retreats and like baptismal classes and things like that. He's a very good teacher. And I had one of his brother's weddings and baptism and a couple house blessings. He has, I don't know what it is now, the last time I talked to him, he has over 50 nieces and nephews, having 14 siblings. So he called me once, and by this time I was no longer in the area where he lived. East of here, I was in the North Carolina mountains in the parish of Jefferson. And he called me up and said, "Padre, can you come to Monroe and bless my brother's house? And then after the house blessing, we'll have a little dinner, and they're all musicians and play music and all that." And so I was very busy. I had 2 parishes in the mountains, and I was the only priest for 1,000 square miles, so I had a big territory. And so I called him back, and he didn't answer the phone, so I left him a message. I said, "Gabriel, I've got an idea. Why don't you go to the seminary and become a priest, and then you can bless all of your brother's houses?" I was just kind of being sarcastic. He told me he listened to that message over and over, and even left it on his phone. And he came from a very religious family. He even had an uncle who was a priest. And he finally called me and said, "Would you write a letter for me in the seminarian program?" And so I did, and it took him a while. He had problems with his paperwork and everything else. But he was ordained as a priest of the diocese. And as I mentioned, just very recently, he was appointed pastor of the parish in Thomasville. So I always tease him about that story. I say, "You become a priest." Like his family is like a little village itself with 50-some nieces and nephews. There's always one of them having a confirmation or first communion or something, or the marriages. So anyway, and his father is one of the few people I know that makes me feel tall, because his father is about this tall, and his mother is very sweet. She does a lot of knitting and crocheting, and she even made me a pillow with the words on it from John 15:16. "I have chosen you." And she's basically stitched that into this pillow that I have. So it's really the call. Jesus said, "You have not chosen me. No, I have chosen you and appointed you to bear fruit that will last." Okay, so a reminder to you and to our listeners out there to go to the website. Those who are not here in person, you can find this handout on holy orders, which is very brief. It's concise, on the point. In the UCAT book, for all of you, there's not a huge section, but there is a section on holy orders, and I have this marked here. It's under the topic, the sacraments of communion and mission. Holy orders begins on 249. So 249 and following will be very good questions on holy orders. And then also, I encourage you to look to those links for the Acts of the Apostles, which I think is a tremendous. It's called the Living Bible. And also, it's only about 20 minutes or so, Fishers of Men, put out by the United States bishops. And again, once you get, you know how on YouTube there's other suggestions and recommendations. On that same page where Fishers of Men, there are other videos on the Catholic priesthood. So you can do some study there as well. As I mentioned at the beginning, a week from today is Easter. So we do have to really get orderly, or a month from today is Easter. So for the next, the next 3 weeks are very critical, because 3 weeks from today is Holy Thursday. So we have our Mass of the Lord's Supper on Holy Thursday. So we really only have a couple of more sessions here on Thursdays prior to Easter. And then we'll go a little bit after to kind of bring it all together. So next week we will talk about the sacrament of penance, confession, and for all those preparing for confirmation who have already been baptized. Now, if you haven't been baptized, you still need to learn about it and to know about it for future. Just in human weakness, we're all prone to fall at one time or another. So peace be with you, and we'll go ahead and leave it right there. But I do look forward to seeing you next week, and also to those who are listening at home.